tuning in. I'm Versha Sharma, senior correspondent at Now This. We're about to go live with Congresswoman AOC. There you go.
Hello. Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm well.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I mean, I know you've been out on the campaign trail, going to protests, doing all sorts of things. So thank you for this.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, we've got a bunch of upcoming primaries coming up, so we're really excited.
Yeah. So, okay, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of phase 2 reopening is going to be starting tomorrow in New York City. But we're also in the middle of an election. So can you just sort of tell our viewers what is important about this New York primary that's going on today?
Yeah, and it's been such a strange election cycle. A lot of other states had primaries earlier in the year. But one of the issues that we have is that New York's primaries are much later. So our New York primaries are coming up, and they are this Tuesday. They're this Tuesday. And so we've got our primaries in New York on Tuesday. In Kentucky, Charles Booker is also running for the Senate and on this Tuesday. And we are having all phases of the ballot, all down ballot all the way to up ballot. So you're voting for your state assembly person, you're voting for Congress, and you're voting still in the presidential primary if you wish to cast your ballot, and also send delegates to the DNC where a lot of policy conversations go on. And so it's a really important election. And in New York, especially in New York City, the primary is almost the decisive election because a lot of our congressional seats are deep blue. And so since the Democrat is very heavily favored to win in November, the real choice is which Democrat you're sending. And so, I won my seat through a primary, and this is going to be my first time up for re-election, but there's a lot of folks that are up and running this year as well.
So you actually early voted yesterday. I think I saw on your Insta story. What are the safety precautions like right now for in-person early voting?
Yeah, so the early voting and the voting provisions and the safety provisions are really great, especially for early voting. And so you show up, there are markers on the ground that are 6 feet apart. And you can walk in, all of the voting booths are 6 feet apart. When you check in, you're kind of given a fresh pen, and it's got, it's one of those pens with kind of the tablet, doodads on the end of it, you know what I'm talking about? And so in New York now, we used to sign in with books. Now you sign in kind of with a sterile pen. There are kind of these glass partition or plastic partition barriers. So there's a lot of social safety and social distancing measures that are being taken.
So what would you want people to keep in mind as they're turning in? I actually got my absentee ballot in New York yesterday, so I'll be returning that soon. But you were a progressive challenger 2 years ago, and there's now a whole new class of progressive challengers. So what should people know about this class?
I would definitely say, do a little bit of research. Doesn't take that much time. Just go in. You can spend 5 to 10 minutes even kind of Googling your local races. You can just go on Google and type in who's on my ballot, and you can learn about all the candidates that are in your specific area, which is really great and a really helpful tool. So you just do that. And there are a lot of progressive challengers. There are a lot of incumbents that are up for re-election, and even from the state assembly and state senate level as well. It's really important to take a look at that, because most often the thing that's directly impacting your life isn't being decided by Congress. It's being decided by your state assembly members and your state senators. And so they're often the ones that decide or can do something about a school. Your city council members, they decide school rezonings, they fix potholes and stoplights, and all of those things that are really important just in day-to-day life. But they also determine the state budget as well. So I would definitely Google it, make sure that you pull it up, and it's a really easy thing to do. But again, I would say if you haven't voted early yet, and if you have not received your absentee ballot by today, you're probably not going to get it tomorrow. So make sure that you develop a plan to vote in person on Tuesday.
I'm glad you mentioned local races, because we're seeing this unprecedented level of sort of engagement right now with the protests that we're seeing. I mean, nationwide, small town America, even all over the world. So what is your hope for turnout, what it might look like? Because in primary elections, turnout tends to be lower.
Yeah, I'm really hoping, and we're already starting to see early signs of much larger turnout this year, which I'm so excited about because one of the reasons we've had so many horrible politicians over the years is because of low turnout, is because they can turn their people out, no one else shows up, and so they kind of get these seats by default. And so I'm really excited because when we have all of these thousands of people in the streets, when they just show up everywhere, like when we're going to be in the streets, we're going to be in classrooms, and we're going to be at the ballot box, it really translates to a lot of change. And we're already seeing sky high absentee ballot requests. And of course, COVID is a huge part of that. But we're really looking forward to seeing what the returns on that look like.
Now, I also read that Wall Street donors have actually been giving money to your opponent. What was your reaction when you saw that?
I think it's flattering. Yeah, Wall Street is pouring millions of dollars into my campaign, against me in my campaign. They're trying to unseat me. I'm CEO of Goldman Sachs, and you've got all these Wall Street CEOs, big pharma CEOs, dark money lobbyists. The Democrat that's running against me is a former Republican. And I think that, frankly, it's a testament to how effective we are. If I was not effective in Congress, if I wasn't an actual threat to their power, they wouldn't waste their time and they wouldn't waste their energy pouring millions of dollars into a safe Democratic district. And so it just goes to show that we're being effective. And the way I kind of feel about it is, bring it on, because we've got people on the ground. And I won my first race being outspent by $3 million. So I ain't scared.
Wow. And you've got a lot of small dollar donors right now for this race as well, against these Wall Street bank executives. So
yeah. The average donation to my campaign is about $23 or $24. But we also have really common donation amounts at around the $10 mark as well. So $10 and $24 is around the average donation to my campaign. I am 100% people funded. I don't take any money from corporate PACs, from lobbyist groups or anything like that. And I think that really matters. A lot of people say that doesn't impact your policy. I can tell you firsthand that it does.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Charles Booker in Kentucky earlier, because it's not just New York. Kentucky and Virginia also have primary elections on Tuesday. So why do you think that Charles Booker is the man to take on Mitch McConnell, and why do people need to pay attention to Senate races like that?
Charles Booker is such a special candidate, and especially if you live in the state of Kentucky, and if you're a Democrat in the state of Kentucky, if you don't know about Charles Booker, learn about him, make sure that you vote for him on Tuesday. He's an incredible candidate. He's a progressive candidate, and he rejects outright this notion that you have to run as like some big money corporate platform in order to win in a Republican, or in order to succeed in a Republican area or Republican state. And I think what's so admirable about him is that he has built a powerful campaign committed to real causes and real issues. And, I think it's so crucially important that Democrats keep the House, take back the Senate, and win the presidency. But beyond that, what is also really important is what kind of Democratic Party we have. And if our Democratic Party is largely influenced by corporate interests, that's a very different outcome than if we elect a Democratic Party that is rooted in progressive causes, is people funded, and divested from lobbyists. And so that changes the course of our country. And so, I think Charles Booker is a fabulous candidate. I'm really excited for him. And, I think that the time is right. The time The time is right for so many of these progressive candidates that we're seeing.
Now, Kentucky cut a number of polling locations, especially in overwhelmingly Black communities. How do people fight back against that kind of voter suppression when it happens?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's horrible. And what we're seeing here is just a 21st century Jim Crow that a lot of Southern states and Republicans in Southern states are trying to revitalize. They're trying to bring it back. There's no excuse. This is a clear targeting of Black voters and Black communities, and they're trying to take the vote. There's no other reason why you would take away thousands of poll sites from predominantly Black communities. And we saw the same thing in Georgia as well, that the insane 7-8 hour lines were happening in Black neighborhoods. They were not happening in white neighborhoods. They were not happening in white affluent neighborhoods. And we're seeing the same exact thing happening in Kentucky. They are not trying to actually win elections by gaining the most amount of votes. They're trying to win elections by disenfranchising Black Americans. And it's like they're going right back to the 1930s, 1940s playbook that is racist. And, you know, it's really just a testament to how weak the Republican Party is, because they cannot win without cheating in a lot of areas.
And I mean, Trump has basically said he wants to downplay mail-in voting or absentee voting, and his own officials have said because they want fewer people to vote. That's why they want to do that. They're on the record saying that.
Yeah, of course. And Trump has literally said, if we allow everyone who is eligible to vote, we'll lose elections. So they're just having a straight up agenda of trying to deny people the vote.
Now, if you guys are just tuning into our IG Live, thanks for joining us. I'm here with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's up for re-election in the Democratic primary on Tuesday. So we've been talking about elections and the importance of voting. I also want to talk to you about the specifics of these ongoing protests, because I saw a tweet that you did the other day that said, we already know what defunding the police looks like. And I thought it was a great explanation. So can you just elaborate on that?
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of kind of debate and a lot of people that are like, oh, defunding the police is a mistake. Defunding the police is not something that we can do. First of all, where were all of y'all when we were defunding teachers, when we were defunding hospitals, when we were defunding infrastructure? Like, where were you? Where were you with all of your outrage when we were defunding the systems that actually prevent crime in the first place? And in terms of what that looks like and what that means, one of the things that I was talking about in that description is that people say, well, what does defunding the police look like? It looks a lot like a suburb, because if you grew up in a suburb, particularly a white affluent suburb, you probably didn't have cops on every single corner that were passing by and asking you questions growing up. If you grew up in a suburb, the police, probably the only time you saw police were when they were called, or in a parade. But if you don't grow up with over policing. If you grew up in a suburb, maybe you had a school nurse in your school and you didn't have 10 cops in your school. So when people freak out about this conversation about defunding the police, the first thing I think it's really important to do is to take a step back and say, is my experience the experience of Black and Brown Americans? Is my experience with the police the same as everyone else's experience with the police in the United States? And because a lot of suburbs have already chosen to defund their police. They put more money in housing. They don't make it their number one budget priority line. In New York City, the budget for the New York City Police Department is $6 billion per year. $6 billion that we spend on policing alone. And there's other reporting they're saying that doesn't even include how much we spend on pensions that are promised and all of that. When you add that, it goes all the way up to potentially $11 billion. You know, there's speculation about how we don't even particularly know. But operationally, $6 billion per year. that we spend on the New York City Police Department. That's more than we spend on housing, youth, homelessness, and health services combined in the city. In the city. So what we are doing is that we are lighting a fire and we are paying for the water instead of preventing the fire in the first place. And what we need to do is that we need to make sure that we take some of that $6 billion and you put it into summer youth employment program. You put it into jobs for young people so that they're not out in the street and, you know, we're just trying to figure out what to do because there's no employment. You take a scoop of that, you know, Ben and Jerry's has a great graphic. You take a bit of it and you put it into housing and make sure that people aren't being housing insecure or evicted and so that they're committing crimes of desperation and petty theft because they can't afford mouthwash or they can't afford diapers for their kids. You prevent the desperation that creates and feeds mass incarceration in the first place. How about, here's another example. Here in New York City, the amount of police officers assigned to New York City public schools alone equals the entire population of the Boston City Police Department. So we have the equivalent of the entire Boston City PD policing our kids in schools. So here's my question. Why, instead of 10 police officers, why don't we have social workers and nurses and facilitators to de-escalate, to help people process, therapists to help kids process their trauma? Like, this is how we dismantle systems of violence and prevent crime in the first place. And so that's a huge, you know, that is a huge element of what we're talking about. That's a huge element of what that means. And, you know, it's the current demand, the current defund demand in New York City that's been presented has been $1 billion out of $6 billion. Yeah. So are you all really freaking out that much about having a $5 billion police budget?
Right. Yeah. You could do a lot with $1 billion.
That's still one of, right now, NYPD would be like about the 33rd most funded militarized force in the world. It's somewhere up there. You know, it's the equivalent of some folks' countries. So, you know, I think we can live with $5 billion.
Thank you for that explanation. If you're watching and you haven't yet seen the Ben and Jerry's graphic, go to their Instagram. It's very helpful at breaking down what defunding the police and investing in other programs might actually look like. But before you go, I want to talk about Trump's big MAGA rally yesterday in Tulsa, his first big one since stay-at-home orders began in March. People are talking about how the Trump campaign was bragging about the number of tickets that were reserved and it was going to be massive turnout, masks or no masks. But it didn't quite happen. So for people who are not caught up on this story yet, can you explain what happened with TikTok users and K-pop fans?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's like a constellation of factors that go into this. Yeah. But one of I think the most notable factors that have to do with the power of everyday people is that people just united. You know, I think it really started on TikTok. So shout out to all our TikTokers on there, you know, and Zoomers, but it quickly shared across to IG and Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat. But basically, you had a bunch of teens reserve up to 1 million tickets into Trump's rally in Tulsa. And so what this did was that it triggered a series of events that kind of yielded this very bizarre situation, which is that the campaign started bragging that they had 1 million people registered to Trump's Tulsa rally. This was going to be one of the biggest rallies. They had set up outdoor space. Trump was talking about getting the venue next door. They were going to pack it to tens of thousands of people. Zoomers came in. Facebook moms came in. It was like that end Avengers scene of like every community on social media. And they're like, we're going to get all the tickets. And it basically trashed the Trump campaign's data. And so they didn't do the turnout, or perhaps they didn't do the turnout. I don't know their internals. But point is, it doesn't seem like that turnout operation came. When you say that 1 million people are going to show up to a 20,000 person stadium, a lot of people are going to be like, I don't think I'm going to go. we're in the middle of a pandemic. You're probably going to be around a lot of other people that aren't wearing masks because the president doesn't wear a mask. And so, you know, like they really gassed themselves up. Like they really thought 1 million people wanted to go to their white supremacist open mic. And it didn't happen. And so they were scrambling at the end. At the end of the day, only 6,200 people showed up. So little light at the end of our week. And so shout out to the Zoomers.
Yeah, there were other comments that he said that I do think are maybe getting a little downplayed because of all the talk about turnout. And it was pretty shocking. He said that he asked to slow down testing because he thinks the numbers make them look bad. So what was your reaction? Can you respond to that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, per usual, this administration is engaging in just not just the dismantling of our democracy, but just outright decisions that are killing people and likely killing tens of thousands of people. And so last night, Trump said on stage that the numbers were too high. And guess what? If you take a COVID test and you're positive, then people know that you're positive. And so he decided, and he said that he told his team to slow down testing in the United States. And as we know, testing is the most important factor in getting someone treatment and doing contact tracing and making sure that we save lives. Because even if you're positive and you're asymptomatic or you're less symptomatic, you could pass on to somebody else. But if you don't know that you're positive, you could go around spreading the disease. And so what we're talking about when he talks about ramping down the testing and telling people to bring down the testing to manipulate the numbers, what you're saying is that you allowed a lot of people to potentially endanger the lives or kill other people unknowingly.
I mean, White House officials are now trying to downplay it, right? They said it was a tongue-in-cheek comment or it was a joke. But
yeah, it's just like how his racism is a joke, right? It's not.
Yeah, that's true. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, his Attorney General, Bill Barr, this weekend tried to fire and then successfully fired the U.S. Attorney for New York. You've said before, for other reasons, that you think that Barr should resign. Do you think that he should be impeached at this point?
You know, I think there are several members of Trump's administration that, under the rule of law and under proper procedure, would be impeached, that they are impeachable. And I believe that Bill Barr is absolutely impeachable. But there's quite a few, including the president himself. The president could be impeached several times over for varying crimes that he has committed. And I do believe that Bill Barr cannot be trusted. He is trying to play a pivotal role in dismantling our democracy.
And we just learned about some more, a lot of problematic behavior from Trump in John Bolton's new book. I don't know if you've seen any of those stories going around.
Well, I know Bolton's book had come out, which don't buy that. Just don't buy it.
Literally, this does exactly what I was telling everybody the other day. He was invited to testify by House Democrats, and he did not.
He's doing this right now to make money. So, he was invited during the impeachment proceedings and the investigations to testify and share with us what he knew. And when it mattered, when he had information that could save people's lives, he didn't show up. But nevertheless, we are hearing accusations and revelations. But again, we don't know. The substance of them are extraordinarily serious, but they are subject to further investigation.
Yeah. Now, I just want to give a shout out to one of the commenters who did say K-pop stands for public health officials, which might not be a bad idea, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Just as a final question before we sign off. Now, you've spent a year and a half in Congress. What have you learned that you feel is really important?
I think one of the things that I've learned is that change is really, really possible. We're on just we are like right there on the cusp of, I think, tipping over a lot of imbalances of power, but it's really going to take us to be present and to believe and participate in all of these systems. And it doesn't mean we have to choose between the streets and the ballot box. It just means we got to do it all. It means mutual aid. It means bail funds. It means voting. It means like all of it. So we need to be firing on all cylinders because we have a very unique window of opportunity, and we have to maximize it. We really have to maximize it.
Great. All right, AOC, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it and hope to talk to you again after Tuesday.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.